The argument started over a trash can, but it almost turned my entire neighborhood against me. If you've ever dealt with someone who believed a clipboard gave them more power than common sense, you're going to understand exactly how this morning felt. It was 6:42 on a cool Tuesday morning when I rolled my dark green trash can down the driveway. The plastic wheels clicked over the concrete joints, and somewhere farther down the street, I could already hear the low diesel rumble of the city's garbage truck beginning its weekly route. Everything about the morning felt ordinary. The sprinklers hissed across fresh-cut lawns. A newspaper landed with a soft thud on my neighbor's porch. The air carried that familiar mix of damp grass and coffee drifting from open kitchen windows. I had lived in this neighborhood for almost 9 years. Tuesday mornings always looked the same. Everyone knew when to put their trash cans out because the city collected them before 7. Nobody thought twice about it. Until Linda Foster decided this Tuesday would be different. She was already standing near the entrance of my driveway before I reached the curb. Perfectly pressed polo shirt. HOA badge clipped neatly to a lanyard. A thick binder tucked beneath one arm. Phone already raised in the other hand. She wasn't walking her dog. She wasn't heading to work. She was waiting for me. "Stop right there," she called before I even reached the street. Her voice carried farther than it needed to. 2 garage doors nearby stopped halfway open. One neighbor paused while loading golf clubs into his SUV. Another froze with a coffee mug halfway to his lips. I stopped pushing the trash can. "What seems to be the problem?" I asked. Linda pointed at the spot where the wheels rested against the curb. "That trash can can't stay there." I looked down, then back at her. "It goes here every Tuesday." "Not anymore." She tapped a page inside her binder without showing it to me. "The HOA has determined this placement violates community standards." Community standards. Not city rules. Not safety. Not traffic. Community standards. I kept my hands on the handle. "The city collects from this side." She gave a small smile that never reached her eyes. "The HOA comes first." Then she lifted her phone and took a picture. Click. Another one. Click. The sound seemed louder than the garbage truck growing closer. Across the street, someone quietly started recording with their own phone. I pretended not to notice. The truck rounded the corner, its hydraulic arm humming as it approached the neighboring houses. The driver slowed when he saw Linda standing in the street arguing beside a trash can. He looked confused but kept moving. Linda stepped closer. "If you don't move it immediately, I'll document this as a violation." There it was. Not a request. Not a conversation. A violation. I looked at the trash can. Then I noticed something odd. Printed in bright white letters along the front was a faded city identification number I had somehow never paid attention to before. The garbage truck stopped 3 houses away. Linda smiled as though she had already won. I rested one hand on the handle, reached into my pocket with the other, and pulled out my phone. Instead of moving the trash can, I searched for one number I hadn't needed in years. The garbage truck disappeared around the corner, leaving the neighborhood strangely quiet. Linda Foster lowered her phone with the satisfied smile of someone who believed she had just documented an open and shut case. I slipped my own phone back into my pocket without making the call I had almost placed. Whatever this had become, I wasn't going to solve it in the middle of the street. "I'll expect that can to be relocated before next Tuesday," Linda said, closing her binder with a firm snap. "Otherwise, the violation process begins." I nodded once. "Have a good morning." She seemed almost disappointed that I hadn't argued. As she walked away, I noticed several neighbors pretending not to watch anymore. Garage doors finished opening. Coffee mugs disappeared behind front doors. The neighborhood resumed its routine, but something had shifted. I could feel it. Inside my house, I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee before sitting at the kitchen table. Through the window, my trash can still stood exactly where the city had always collected it. Nothing about its position looked unusual. By the time I finished breakfast, an email notification appeared on my phone. The sender read, "Greenwood Estates Homeowners Association." I opened it. "Courtesy notice of community standard violation." Courtesy. The word almost made me laugh. According to the email, I had improperly placed my trash container in a visible location that failed to meet HOA placement requirements. Attached were 2 photographs. Both had been taken less than 30 minutes earlier. Linda had wasted no time. I read the notice twice. Then a third time. There was no reference to any city ordinance. No sanitation regulation. No municipal code. Only a citation to an HOA guideline with a paragraph number. That struck me as odd. A second notification arrived before I even locked my phone. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was from the neighborhood social media page. Someone had posted a blurry picture of Linda standing beside my driveway. The caption simply read, "Looks like another homeowner forgot the rules." Comments started appearing almost immediately. About time someone enforced the standards. The neighborhood has rules for a reason. I hope they issue a fine. Not everyone agreed. One comment caught my attention. Isn't that where the city tells everyone to leave their cans? The question disappeared beneath newer replies within minutes. No answer. Only opinions. Later that afternoon, I checked my mailbox while bringing in a package. A white envelope with the HOA logo rested inside. The email hadn't been enough. Now there was printed paperwork. Inside was the same notice, this time signed by Linda Foster. Across the bottom, one sentence stood out in bold letters. Failure to comply may result in escalating financial penalties. I carried the letter back inside and placed it next to my coffee mug. Something about the wording bothered me. Not the threat. The certainty. It assumed the HOA's authority settled the matter before anyone had asked whether the rule itself was valid. I opened my laptop. Instead of searching for lawyers or reading angry discussions online, I downloaded every HOA document available to homeowners. By evening, my dining table had disappeared beneath printed pages. Community bylaws, architectural guidelines, parking rules, landscaping requirements, dozens of sections. I wasn't looking for an argument. I was looking for one sentence. If Linda was right, I wanted to know exactly why. And if she wasn't, I intended to find the first place where the paperwork stopped matching reality. There is a strange feeling that comes when you realize the answer isn't hidden in a complicated law. It's hidden in one sentence everyone else stopped reading. By 9 o'clock that night, my dining room looked less like a place for dinner and more like a small legal archive. Stacks of printed HOA documents covered nearly every inch of the table. Community bylaws, architectural standards, landscaping policies, parking regulations, holiday decoration limits, even rules about mailbox colors. Linda hadn't exaggerated one thing. The HOA certainly had plenty of rules. I highlighted every section mentioning trash containers. One paragraph required homeowners to store trash cans out of sight except on collection day. That made sense. Another required residents to return them promptly after pickup. Also reasonable. Then I reached the section Linda had cited in her notice. I read it once. Then again. The wording felt incomplete. It prohibited leaving containers in common areas and visible for extended periods, but it never actually identified where a homeowner was supposed to place the container during scheduled city collection. I leaned back in my chair. Something wasn't adding up. If the rule didn't specify placement on pickup day, where had Linda gotten that authority? I opened my laptop again. Instead of searching the HOA website, I searched the city's sanitation department. Within seconds, I found the official collection guidelines. Large bold letters appeared near the top of the page. Place carts at the curb before collection. I frowned. That was exactly what I had done. I kept reading. Containers should be positioned adjacent to the curb with sufficient clearance for collection equipment. Again, exactly what I had done. The more I read, the stranger the situation became. The city's instructions weren't vague. They were remarkably specific. Distance from parked vehicles. Distance from mailboxes. Distance from fire hydrants. Pickup hours. Everything was carefully explained. Not once did it mention asking permission from an HOA before placing a container for municipal collection. I opened another browser tab. Then another. Soon I was reading municipal sanitation ordinances instead of neighborhood guidelines. Outside, rain began tapping softly against the kitchen window. The house had grown completely quiet. Hours slipped by unnoticed. At one point my phone buzzed. A new HOA email. Reminder. Violation pending review. I ignored it. The answer was beginning to feel close enough to touch. Just after midnight, I downloaded a PDF from the city's Public Works Department. Unlike the HOA documents, this one listed legal authority beside every section. I slowly compared both documents side by side. HOA guideline on the left. City regulation on the right. My eyes moved line by line. Paragraph after paragraph. Then I stopped. There it was. Not hidden. Not complicated. Just one sentence. The HOA document never claimed authority over municipal collection procedures. It only regulated storage before and after pickup. Linda had spoken as though the HOA could decide exactly where the city wanted its garbage trucks to collect. The written rule never actually said that. I stared at both pages for several seconds. Maybe I was missing something. Maybe another ordinance gave the HOA that power. Or maybe everyone, including members of the board, had simply accepted Linda's interpretation because no one had ever challenged it. I wasn't interested in proving anyone wrong. I only wanted to know which rule actually controlled the curb outside my house. The next morning, before sunrise, I picked up my phone. This time I didn't hesitate. Instead of calling the HOA office, I dialed the number listed under the city's sanitation services department. When someone answered, my very first question was simple. Can a homeowners association tell residents where the city requires trash carts to be placed on collection day? The woman who answered the phone didn't sound surprised by my question. That was the first clue I was finally talking to the right person. City Sanitation Services, this is Rebecca. How may I help you? I repeated my question carefully. Can a homeowners association decide where residents must place their trash carts if the city already has collection requirements? There was a brief pause. Not the uncomfortable kind. More like someone deciding how much information they should give before asking another question. May I ask what city you're calling from? I gave her the name. A keyboard clicked softly in the background. Then she asked another question. Are you asking because your HOA instructed you to move your cart somewhere different from our collection point? I blinked. Yes. Another pause. Then I heard something unexpected. A quiet chuckle. Not mocking. More the sound of someone who had heard the same story more than once. You wouldn't believe how often we get that question. I leaned forward in my chair. So, our department establishes collection procedures for municipal waste service, she explained calmly. Homeowners associations can create neighborhood rules about storing containers before and after collection, but they can't change the location required for safe city pickup. I didn't interrupt. She continued. If an HOA instructs residents to place carts somewhere that prevents proper collection, our collection requirements still apply. Those words settled over the room like the final piece of a puzzle. I looked at the printed HOA notice lying beside my laptop. Linda had never mentioned any of that. Rebecca wasn't finished. If you'd like, she said, I can email you the official collection guidelines and the municipal code references that govern curbside placement. Yes, please. They're public documents. Within seconds, a notification appeared in my inbox. I opened the attachments immediately. Unlike the HOA paperwork, these documents carried city letterhead, ordinance numbers, revision dates, and department signatures. Everything was precise. Everything was traceable. I printed every page. As the printer hummed across the room, I noticed one paragraph highlighted in the guidance document. It explained that consistent cart placement ensured automated trucks could safely complete collection routes without creating hazards or unnecessary delays. There it was. The city's concern wasn't appearance. It was function, safety, efficiency. The exact opposite of the argument Linda had made in my driveway. Before hanging up, Rebecca offered one final piece of advice. If anyone questions the city's requirements, they're welcome to contact us directly. We explain this pretty regularly. I thanked her and ended the call. For the first time since Tuesday morning, I wasn't wondering whether I had misunderstood the rules. Now I knew exactly what the city expected. The only question left was whether the HOA board knew it too. That afternoon, another email arrived from Linda. Subject line, second courtesy reminder. The message informed me that my violation would be discussed during the next HOA compliance review. She encouraged me to correct the issue before further action became necessary. There was still no reference to city sanitation requirements. Only the same HOA paragraph she had quoted before. I didn't reply. Instead, I organized everything into a single folder. HOA notice, photographs, city sanitation guidelines, municipal code excerpts, email from Rebecca, printed ordinances, one folder, one timeline, one version of the facts. As I closed the folder, another envelope slid through my front mail slot. This one wasn't from the HOA. It bore the official seal of the city's Public Works Department. Inside was a signed letter confirming exactly what Rebecca had explained over the phone. I smiled for the first time all week. Linda thought she had built a case against me. She had no idea the city had just handed me something much more powerful than an opinion. They had handed me documentation. The strongest evidence doesn't make a sound. It simply waits until everyone else has finished talking. The following Monday felt unusually calm. Maybe it was because I had stopped wondering whether I was right. Or maybe it was because every document I needed now sat inside a single blue folder on my kitchen counter. The HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening. Until then, I intended to do exactly what I had always done. Nothing more, nothing less. Tuesday morning arrived with another cool breeze drifting through the neighborhood. At 6:40, I rolled my trash cart down the driveway. Same route, same curb, same position recommended by the city. I didn't even glance toward Linda's house. I already knew she was watching. Sure enough, before I reached the street, her front door opened. She crossed the lawn with quick, determined steps, her phone already in her hand. "You've decided to ignore the notice," she called. I rested my hands on the cart. "I've decided to follow the city's collection instructions." Her expression hardened. "The HOA has already ruled on this." "I don't believe it has." She lifted the printed notice. "You've received 2 written warnings." "I have. And you're refusing to comply." "I'm complying with the city's requirements." For a second, neither of us spoke. The garbage truck turned onto the street. Its engine echoed between the houses. Linda looked toward it, then back at me. "That won't matter during Thursday's meeting." I simply nodded. "We'll see." The truck stopped in front of my house. The hydraulic arm extended with practiced precision. It gripped the cart exactly where I had positioned it, lifted it, emptied it, set it gently back onto the pavement. The driver never left his seat. He never hesitated. The entire collection took less than 20 seconds. Linda watched every second of it. She didn't say a word. As the truck disappeared down the street, she quietly took another photograph before turning around and walking home. No victory speech. No warning. Just another picture. Later that afternoon, another envelope arrived. This one was different. It wasn't labeled a courtesy reminder. Across the top were 3 words printed in bold. Notice of hearing. According to the letter, I was required to appear before the HOA Compliance Committee on Thursday evening to answer for repeated violations. Possible outcomes included escalating fines and additional enforcement measures. Attached was a familiar photograph. My trash cart. Exactly where the city had instructed me to place it. I slipped the letter into the blue folder without reacting. The folder was becoming thicker by the day. HOA notices, city ordinances, official guidance, department correspondence, photographs. Every piece fit neatly into the same story. That evening, while watering the flowers near my porch, my next-door neighbor, Mark Ellis, walked over carrying a garden hose. He lowered his voice. "I've been meaning to ask you something." I turned off the water. "Sure. My wife and I got fined last year over our recycling bins." I looked at him. "We paid it because Linda said those were the rules." He hesitated before continuing. "You really think the HOA got this wrong?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I opened the blue folder and handed him a copy of the city's collection guidelines. He read the first page in complete silence. Then the second. His eyebrows slowly lifted. "I've never seen this before." "Neither had I said. Mark looked back toward Linda's house across the street. Then he looked down at the city letter again. "If this applies to everyone." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. For the first time since this started, I realized Thursday's meeting wasn't just about my trash can anymore. It was about every homeowner who had accepted a rule simply because no one had ever thought to question it. People often imagine dramatic confrontations happen because someone raises their voice. In reality, the biggest turning points usually begin with silence, in a room full of people reading the same sentence for the first time. Thursday evening arrived with heavy gray clouds hanging over Greenwood Estates. The clubhouse parking lot was fuller than I had ever seen it. Normally, HOA meetings attracted a dozen homeowners at most. Tonight, nearly every space was occupied. Word had spread. Whether it was because of my hearing or because neighbors had started comparing old violation notices, I couldn't say. I stepped out of my truck carrying only one thing. The blue folder. No briefcase. No lawyer. No speech. Just facts. Inside the clubhouse, folding chairs had been arranged in neat rows facing a long table where the HOA board members sat beneath the community logo. Linda Foster occupied the center seat. Her binder was noticeably thicker than usual. She smiled politely as residents entered, greeting everyone with the confidence of someone expecting another routine meeting. When she saw me, the smile faded just slightly. I took a seat in the second row. Mark Ellis sat beside me. Without saying a word, he tapped the copy of the city guidelines folded inside his notebook. Across the aisle, another couple quietly held what looked like old violation letters. Interesting. The room settled. The board president officially opened the meeting before turning to the compliance agenda. Our first matter concerns repeated violations involving improper trash container placement. Linda stood immediately. She projected several photographs onto a screen. There was my driveway, my trash cart, another angle, another photograph, the date, the time, everything carefully documented. As you can see, Linda began. The homeowner has repeatedly refused to comply with HOA standards despite multiple written notices. She spoke calmly, professionally, almost rehearsed. Several board members nodded as she referenced paragraph numbers from the community handbook. Then she finished with a sentence that seemed designed to end the discussion. The homeowner has openly disregarded HOA authority. The room became quiet. The board president looked toward me. Mr. Walker, would you like to respond? I stood slowly. There was no anger, no frustration. I carried the blue folder to the front table and placed it gently beside Linda's binder. I'd like to hand each board member a copy of one document. No one objected. I began passing identical packets around the table. Each contained the same city letter, the same sanitation guideline, the same municipal ordinance. No commentary, no highlighted accusations, just official documents. Linda watched silently. One board member adjusted his glasses before reading the first page. Another flipped directly to the ordinance. The president read much more slowly. No one spoke for nearly a full minute. Paper quietly turned from one page to the next. Finally, one board member looked up. Linda. His voice was careful. Where did these come from? The city's Public Works Department. I answered before she could. He lowered his eyes back to the letter. It says municipal collection procedures are governed by city ordinance. Another member reached the highlighted paragraph. This also says HOAs may regulate storage before and after collection, but not collection placement itself. Linda shifted in her chair. I've always enforced the handbook this way. The room remained silent. No one challenged her, but no one agreed either. The board president compared the HOA handbook with the city documents side by side. He frowned. Then he turned another page. And another. Finally, he looked directly at Linda. I don't see any language here giving us authority to override municipal collection procedures. For the first time since this began, Linda didn't have an immediate answer. She opened her binder, flipped through section after section, stopped, turned back again. The confidence that had carried her through the evening slowly disappeared. Then, from somewhere in the audience, a quiet voice broke the silence. I paid a fine for this exact thing 2 years ago. Another voice followed. So did we. Then another. And us. The room that had come expecting to discuss one trash can suddenly realize it might have been discussing years of mistakes. The room didn't erupt into chaos. It became something far more dangerous. People started remembering. For several seconds after the last homeowner admitted paying a fine, no one moved. The clubhouse felt unnaturally still. The air conditioner hummed overhead. Someone shifted in a folding chair. Pages rustled softly across the board table. Linda remained standing with one hand resting on her binder, but the certainty that had carried her through the meeting was gone. The board president cleared his throat. Does anyone else have information relevant to this matter? A hand rose near the back. An older woman named Susan stood slowly. I received a violation 3 summers ago. She reached into her purse and removed a yellowed envelope. I paid $75 because I was told my trash container was too close to the curb. She placed the notice on the front table. Before anyone could respond, another resident stood. My family received one too. Then another. And us. Soon several homeowners were walking toward the front of the room, carrying folded letters, payment receipts, and faded violation notices. One after another, they formed a small pile beside my blue folder. No one had planned this. No one had coordinated it. It happened because once one person spoke, everyone else realized they weren't the only one. Mark Ellis stepped forward. I paid $100 last year. He unfolded his receipt. I assumed the HOA knew something I didn't. The board members quietly examined the growing stack of paperwork. Different years, different addresses, the same issue, trash containers, the same paragraph number, the same interpretation. One board member looked toward Linda. Approximately how many of these notices have been issued? She hesitated. I don't know the exact number. An estimate. She looked down. Several. Several dozen? I'd have to review the records. Nobody accused her of acting maliciously. Nobody raised their voice. That somehow made the moment even heavier. The board president slowly removed his reading glasses. If these city documents are accurate, he looked across the room, then we may have been enforcing a rule beyond the authority granted in our own governing documents. The sentence landed harder than anyone expected, not because it was dramatic, because it was careful, measured, impossible to dismiss. A woman sitting beside the window quietly asked the question everyone else was already thinking. If the rule was interpreted incorrectly, what happens to all the people who already paid? No one answered. Linda opened her binder again. Page after page turned beneath her fingertips. Minutes earlier, she had quoted the handbook from memory. Now she seemed to be searching for something she had always assumed was there. She stopped. Read. Turned another page. Nothing. The room watched without interruption. Finally she spoke. I believed I was enforcing the standards as they had always been explained to me. It wasn't a defense. It sounded more like a realization. The board president nodded slowly. I understand. Then he looked toward the remaining board members. I think we need to recess. One member agreed immediately. So do I. Another nodded. I'd like legal counsel to review both the municipal ordinances and our enforcement history before any further action. The motion passed without objection. Just like that, my hearing ended. Not with a fine. Not with a vote against me. With uncertainty. Residents gathered in small groups throughout the clubhouse. Instead of talking about my trash can, they compared dates on old notices. They exchanged photographs, violation letters, canceled checks. People who had barely spoken to each other before were suddenly piecing together the same timeline. As I slipped my blue folder back under my arm, Mark caught up with me near the exit. You know, he said quietly, this was never really about your driveway. I looked back through the clubhouse doors. Linda was still seated alone at the board table, surrounded by binders that suddenly seemed much thinner than they had an hour earlier. No, I replied. I don't think it ever was. Behind us, I heard the board president make one final request before the room emptied. I want every trash container violation issued over the last 5 years pulled before our next meeting. The silence that followed told me the real investigation had only just begun. The letter arrived 11 days later. There was nothing dramatic about it. No certified envelope. No attorney's logo. Just the familiar HOA return address in the upper left corner. I carried it inside without rushing. For nearly 2 weeks, the neighborhood had been unusually quiet. No violation notices. No warning emails. No photographs of trash cans appearing in anyone's inbox. Even Linda's morning patrols had disappeared. It was as if Greenwood Estates had collectively taken a deep breath. I opened the envelope at the kitchen counter. The first sentence immediately caught my attention. Following a review conducted by the board of directors. I kept reading. The board had unanimously voted to suspend enforcement of all trash container placement violations until an independent legal review of the governing documents could be completed. Every pending violation was dismissed, including mine. I read the paragraph twice, not because I doubted it, because the words felt strangely ordinary after everything that had happened. There was no apology, no admission of wrongdoing, only the acknowledgement that enforcement would cease immediately. By itself, that would have been enough. But there was a second page. The board announced the formation of a special committee to review previous compliance actions involving trash container placement. Residents who believed they had received fines under the disputed interpretation could submit documentation for reconsideration. I leaned back against the counter. The blue folder had accomplished exactly what I hoped it would. Not revenge. Review. Later that afternoon, I walked to the mailbox and noticed several neighbors standing near the community bulletin board. Someone had pinned the HOA announcement where everyone could read it. People gathered quietly, reading, comparing copies, talking in low voices. Mark waved me over. They finally posted it. I nodded. Susan smiled as she folded her copy into her purse. I still have my old receipt. So do we. Another homeowner replied. For the first time since moving into Greenwood Estates, conversations weren't centered on rumors. They revolved around documents, facts, dates, policies. The board meeting scheduled for the following week attracted an even larger crowd than the previous one. This time I attended as an observer. No folder. No prepared statement. The board president opened the session with a short announcement. After consultation with municipal officials and independent counsel, the board has determined that previous enforcement regarding trash container placement may not have been consistent with applicable municipal authority. Again, no one applauded. The room simply listened. He continued, "Future community guidelines will be revised to reflect the city's collection requirements." Then came something I never expected. Linda stood. She looked noticeably different from the confident woman who had confronted me in my driveway weeks earlier. Her binder remained closed. She addressed the room. Without notes, I enforced the handbook according to the interpretation that had been passed down before I joined the board. She paused. I now understand that interpretation was incomplete. No excuses. No blame. Just one quiet acknowledgement. She returned to her seat. The board then voted unanimously to repeal the existing enforcement policy. The motion carried without opposition. Just like that, years of unquestioned practice officially ended. After the meeting, residents slowly drifted toward the parking lot. Some discussed reimbursement requests. Others talked about updating neighborhood policies. Mark walked beside me toward our trucks. "You know what surprised me most?" he asked. "What?" "No lawsuit." I smiled. I never wanted one. He laughed softly. "I guess paperwork turned out to be stronger." As I drove home through the neighborhood, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Trash collection was the next morning. Several homeowners had already placed their carts exactly where the city's guidelines instructed. No one hurried outside to move them. No one took photographs. No one complained. The street looked completely ordinary. Sometimes that's what real change looks like. Not celebration. Not victory speeches. Just an ordinary neighborhood finally following the right rule. 3 months later, the trash truck stopped in front of my house at exactly 6:42 on a Tuesday morning. I noticed the time because it was the same minute this entire story had begun. The driver lowered the mechanical arm. It gripped the cart, lifted it, emptied it, set it back onto the curb. 20 seconds. Just another ordinary collection. When the truck rolled away, I stood at the end of my driveway for a moment, listening to the quiet that followed. No footsteps crossing the lawn. No camera pointed in my direction. No one reminding me about community standards. Only birds somewhere above the maple trees and the distant sound of another truck turning onto the next street. Greenwood Estates looked exactly the same. The brick homes hadn't changed. The sidewalks were still lined with trimmed hedges. Children still waited for school buses every weekday morning. But something invisible had shifted. People no longer confused confidence with authority. They asked questions now. A week earlier, the HOA had distributed its revised handbook. The section on trash containers occupied barely half a page. Storage before collection. Storage after collection. A single sentence acknowledged that placement during municipal pickup would follow city requirements. Simple, clear, accurate. It was remarkable how few words it took to prevent years of misunderstanding. The reimbursement committee eventually completed its review. Dozens of homeowners received refunds for fines connected to the old interpretation. Some checks were small. Others surprised even the board. Nobody celebrated those payments. Most people simply deposited them and moved on. The issue had never really been about the money. It had been about fairness. One Saturday morning I saw Linda while walking back from the neighborhood mailbox. She was planting flowers outside her front porch. For a brief moment, our eyes met. Neither of us crossed the street. Neither of us pretended the past hadn't happened. She gave a small nod. I returned it. That was all. No apology. No conversation. No need. Some endings don't require words. A few houses farther down, Mark was washing his truck. He smiled when he noticed me. Looks like trash day isn't very exciting anymore. I laughed. I think that's the way it's supposed to be. He nodded. Funny how ordinary feels different now. It did. Because ordinary had been earned. When I reached my front porch, I opened the hall closet where the blue folder still rested on the top shelf. I hadn't touched it in weeks. For a second I considered throwing it away. Instead, I left it where it was. Not as a trophy. Not as a reminder of winning. As proof that keeping records, asking questions, and staying calm can accomplish more than arguing ever will. Sometimes the strongest response isn't the loudest one. It's the one supported by facts. Looking back, people occasionally ask whether I regret challenging the HOA. The answer is always the same. I didn't challenge the HOA. I challenged an interpretation that wasn't supported by the rules. There's a difference. Rules exist to create order, but authority only deserves respect when it respects the rules first. That Tuesday morning began with someone telling me I had no choice. It ended months later with an entire neighborhood discovering that everyone always had one. The choice to verify. The choice to stay calm. The choice to let facts speak before emotions do. The trash can that started the argument eventually became just another trash can, exactly where the city said it belonged. And every Tuesday morning after that, when I rolled it quietly to the curb at 6:42, nobody looked twice. That, more than any apology or victory speech, was the real ending. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive with applause. Sometimes it arrives looking exactly like an ordinary morning, where the only thing anyone notices is that everything is finally where it should have been all along.